is about life in Elizabethan times. And first of all, I'm going to look at things like living standards in Elizabethan England. So something that you will have heard about a lot of times in terms of the Hardwick Hall things and the Globe Theatre and things like that is the Great Chain of Being. So God was at the top of the Great Chain of Being, followed by angels and then human beings and then plants and animals. So that's what the Great Chain of Being was about. And it was really like a feudal system, because in terms of people, you obviously had the monarch at the top, then the nobility, then the gentry, then the peasantry. That's how it worked. And it was almost impossible to move between these groups. Bessa Hardwick managed to do that because she did manage to move from like the gentry to the nobility because of the 4 different marriages and things, but it was usually very, very tough to move between these groups. And that was the pecking order of things. You know, you were going to be, if you were a peasant, at the bottom of the pile. That's how it worked. And all of the manor houses and the theatres and things, where you were in those, were completely in line with the Great Chain of Being. So the servants would be in the hall, and if you were, you know, going to watch a play at the Globe, then you would be in the pits. That's how it would work. Now, the rich and powerful in those days, in the Elizabethan era, were the nobility and gentry. The nobility was made up of the most respected members of society, and this is something that you already know. They were second only to the Queen of England. You could be a duke, an earl or a baron, that would be your title, and you get around about £6,000 a year, which is about the equivalent to £1 million now. You were born into it though, that's what happened. If you're nobility, you were actually born into it. Or you could be awarded it by the Queen, but that was very, very rare. You got protection from torture if you were part of this group. And also you would be beheaded, not hanged, because hanged was seen as something that you would do to the lower classes. The gentry were landlords basically of the countryside. So some of these actually in the end could be richer than the nobility. But what you would be given would be about between £10 and £200 a year, roughly, something like that. So obviously that would make them, you know, worth thousands of pounds, so they would be still seen as extremely rich. And some of these people in the gentry were justices of the peace that I talked about in an earlier podcast. And if you obviously were justice of the peace, or, you know, you could become an MP or something like that, then obviously you had a chance to move up in Elizabethan society. And they often made a lot of money, the gentry, from trading. So that was another way that they could move up the social ladder. So what was it actually like to be wealthy? Well, to be quite honest, in Elizabethan England, if you weren't wealthy, your life wasn't particularly good. And we'll talk about that with poverty later on. So it was really good to be wealthy because you had a chance to be entertained at things like the Globe Theatre and things like that. You had lovely manor houses, like possibly Hardwick Hall that Bessa Hardwick lived in. And you were proud to show off your wealth, basically. That's what happened. You built fine houses with your money, like I mentioned, like Hardwick Hall, Speke Hall, different places like that. And you would always eat things like meat and wine. And you'd have people round for dinner because you wanted to show how wealthy you were. That was extremely important. With fashions, you'd wear fine clothes, and you would also live in the countryside because the more land you had and not being close to other people showed you wealth and prosperity. And something else that was actually very bizarre, but I've told you about this a few times, is the whiten the faces with lead. Because the idea was that if you were white, really, really pale, then it would mean that you've been rich enough to employ people to do the outside work for you, which obviously was really significant. And people also copied that because Elizabeth dressed like that. And also they would wear ruffs round the neck here, and the ruffs were really significant because, again, Elizabeth wore those, so it was obviously copying the fashions, you know, of the time, and that was, you know, what people would always do then. And also something else that, you know, this showed, this wealth, is it made it look like a golden age, the Elizabethan era. So all these manor houses, the money that they made, the fashions that they wore, you know, the theatres and things, all showed it was a golden age. And because they were wealthy, they were basically free to live their lives how they wanted and show how successful they were. That's how it worked.